Welcome to Ask the Doctor, where you put your questions to our Primal Doctors and you get some answers. Dr. Shan, thanks for joining me today.
Good to see you again, Steve.
We've got some amazing questions from the website, so we're going to dive straight in as always. So, do babies, this is from Julie, do babies carry their mother's immunity, and if so, for how long?
Okay, so yeah, great question. So babies, when they're born, they have, usually in the final 3 months of pregnancy, most of the antibodies are transferred across the placenta from mother to baby. So when baby's born, they have a level of immunity transferred from the mother as a result of the pregnancy. But that doesn't actually remain unless the baby's being breastfed. Mm-hmm. Breastfed is a great way for the immunity to be transferred from mother to baby in the form of antibodies, and it can maintain that. The immunity that they're actually born with doesn't last more than a small number of months, okay. Say several weeks. And so after that, babies start to build up their own immunity by their exposure to various different germs. So that really is how babies develop their immunity. So it's always recommended that mothers aim to breastfeed, certainly in the initial mm-hmm. stages after birth, to help build up the baby's immunity in the first number of months.
It's a really interesting thought, because on the news recently there was a big topic about, actually in Britain we're one of the worst at actually breastfeeding, as in the number of people that actually breastfeed, mm-hmm. Whereas other countries, you know, it's like 9 out of 10 breastfeed, and, whereas in the UK it seems to be a really low number. I wonder if that again is marketing. People are so good at now marketing, you know, the substitute milks and so on. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, my wife, they have 5 kids, my wife, she tried to breastfeed all of them. Some she managed to do a few months, some she only managed a couple of weeks. So I'm not saying, it's hard to, you have to be careful what you say, because some people just can't breastfeed and some it's very uncomfortable, very painful. But the fact that we're probably one of the worst in Europe as a country could be down to marketing and so on and so forth. But there is definitely, what you're saying then, a benefit of not having, you know, the powdered milk or the supermarket milks. There is a real benefit based on the immunity system to breastfeeding.
Well, even the manufacturers of these powdered milks, I've seen some adverts where they say that actually breast milk is the best way, and you know, that needs to be obviously recognised. Yes, it's certainly an emotive issue in terms of breastfeeding and whether certain people want to favour it or if they just decide to reject it. I think what's important is taking support available, mm-hmm. Or having your questions answered by your midwife or health visitor or whoever it might be, healthcare professional, and helping to overcome any concerns that one might have around breastfeeding.
So we're talking about breastfeeding, and the question again is about the immunity. Mm-hmm. I've got a question then. So we read a lot these days, again, C-sections and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. We know that if you have a C-section, when we talk about the immunity in terms of the microbiome, the child doesn't take all the advantage if it doesn't sort of come sort of a regular birth. Of a C-section, you lose some of that immunity. So is breastfeeding even more important with a C-section, or are those two not really related?
I think one could make that case. I don't know if there's anything scientifically proven either way, but I would certainly want to favour breastfeeding wherever mm-hmm. possible and wherever achievable.
So there we have the answer to Julie's question. If you want to ask any questions, just to recap, what happens is you go on to primalcure.com. Down the bottom there's a little button that you press called Ask the Doctors. They come into our office and then we sift through your questions, and every Monday evening at 6 p.m. We bring you the show, but also coming very, very shortly, you will be able to go onto the website, and where we have all our blogs and all our news and so on and so forth, you'll be able to see a list of all the questions that have been asked and the answers as well. So maybe you've got a question, see if it's already been answered or not. If not, do submit a question. So thank you very much for that. That's okay. A great answer. So the next question we've got, I really like this question. This comes from Damien. Damien, thank you very much indeed. Damien says, is fruit juice better for children than fizzy pop? This might be a short answer or a very, very long answer. Depends what tangents we go off on.
Oh, which answer would you like first?
Well, you. Let's have the doctor's opinion, then I'll give you mine.
So I think fruit juices, when we're talking, I'm talking specifically about packaged fruit juices that are being purchased in shops. They do go through a pasteurization process, and sometimes they have additives and preservatives, and a lot of the goodness in the fruit is not actually kept within the juice itself. But the sugar content certainly is, and I think you just got to look at the actual sugar content in some of these fruit juices. Sometimes it's very, very high indeed. Even the so-called innocent ones, or the ones that are purporting to be very healthy. Not passing judgment here, just an observation. Yeah. Look at the numbers there, look at the actual sugar content in some of them, and that might help to determine whether or not they're healthy. My preference is always water. Drinking water wherever possible, and that's really, the body is 70% water. That's what we should be consuming. That's what our ancestors have always consumed over the last several centuries, and that's what we should really aim to do. So I think, is one better than the other? In my opinion, probably not. I think if one wants to have fruit juice, I generally recommend juicing it at home and having it fresh there and then consuming it straight away to get as much goodness that you can from the juice itself.
And let's really pick up on what you're saying there, because you're a massive fan of fibre. I'm a massive believer in fibre as well. I've read your book where you talk about, there's a lot of research suggesting we should try and get around 35 grams of fibre, which is a lot. And let's clear up for you at home the difference between juicing and blending, okay? Because if you just buy one of those machines that squashes and squashes and squashes all the juice out and you don't get any of the fibre, then actually you pretty much end up with just the sugar content of the juice. So when we're talking about preparing your fruit juices at home, we're talking about blending as opposed to sort of compressing and just getting the sugar, because then at least you're getting the fibre and the goodness and all the phytonutrients and everything that nature intended.
I think you'll still get some of the soluble fibres and the phytonutrients that you talked about, and some of the other minerals as well. But yes, you obviously be getting a lot of the sugar. But I feel that if you're doing it freshly made at home and you're consuming it straight away, it's going to have much greater effect, much more of a beneficial effect in terms of a nutrient hit, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I say, you never know what they put into packages. And I have to apologise to my good friend Richard Reed, who founded with his friends Innocent. But even though you put trumpets and all those little nice, clever little symbols on the side, you did very well out of that company. Guess who they sold it to? Coca-Cola. Goes to show, hey, Coca-Cola own Innocent smoothies. How bizarre is that? I'm probably going to get sued for that one. But you never know what you're buying in a supermarket packet. As Dr. Shan says, what you should be doing if you want juice is to juice at home. But here's a little bit of a warning from my point of view, and this came to me even before I started the Primal movement with my dentist. Took my kids in, and my Jessie has quite a few problems with the teeth, and it's a shame because out of all my kids, she's probably the most religious, abstaining from the sugar and the sweets and everything. And we've got some dental questions coming up a bit later why that might answer why that is the case. But Jessie, anyway, the dentist said, do you give her fruit juice in the morning? And I went, yeah, I'm such a good dad. She does, she has an orange juice every morning. He said, that's the problem. And I went, what are you talking about? Orange juice is surely good for you. That's what we were taught. But of course, orange juice, especially, like you say, for supermarkets, and especially if you are just squeezing just the juice out, is full of sugar.
Yes, it certainly is, and you know what? A lot of it, the more processed it is, the more terrible it tastes. It doesn't really taste like orange juice at all. If you actually get a good organic orange and juice it yourself at home, you can actually taste what a real orange juice is supposed to taste like, compared to some of the stuff that we purchase in our supermarkets, which I don't know what's in there, honestly.
Who knows what's in it? So I think, again, back to fruit juices. Fruit juices are okay. First of all, if you're trying to lose weight, I'm actually going to say, especially to adults, maybe not so much to children, if you're trying to lose weight, actually, while you're trying to lose that weight, avoid the orange juices, full stop, period, because there are other ways to get the goodness out in your diet other than relying on a juice that is predominantly made up of sugar. But we still haven't answered the question, though. Is fruit juice better for your children than fizzy pop? Fizzy pop, as far as I'm concerned, is a no, whichever way you go, because if it's full fat, well, full fat's the wrong word, but if it's full sugar without the sort of diet prefix, then it's full of sugar. And if it's a diet one, it normally has man-made artificial sweeteners in there, and artificial sweeteners are also a no-no as far as we're concerned, because certainly it's not primal. And secondly, of course, we don't know what it's doing to the microbiome. So fizzy pop, full stop period, is not very, very good. But you said something really interesting, Shan, about water. We don't drink, I don't think, as a population, certainly in the UK, enough water. What's your view on taking straight water, filtering it through whichever way you're filtering it, and then, sort of making it into a soda? Is that a good thing, a bad thing? In other words, if people go, I know I need to drink more water, and I can drink a couple of glasses a day, but to get more water in my lifestyle, I want to occasionally make it into a soda with one of those soda streamers. Is that a good thing? Does that affect the quality of the water by making it fizzy, or does that not affect the water? Or
well, in my opinion, I think it's always better to have the water plain. If you want to add a flavour to it, then put something natural into it. Squeeze a lemon into it, and it can give a really, really pleasant taste. I think if you're going to be pouring in a concentrate, then you have to look at what's in that concentrate, and sometimes there's some really toxic stuff in there that is certainly not good to support our health, and not the primal cure way. So
what about without the concentrate? So in other words, just taking water and just making it sparkling water. Does making sparkling make a difference, or I suppose we're still consuming water and we're not adding additives?
You're still consuming water, I guess, if you must, then that's the way to go.
It's a bit of a loaded question, because I like my fizzy waters.
No judgment from me.
I choose that in a restaurant normally because that's the option that comes in the glass bottle, and I'm totally anti-plastic bottles. So it's normally the one that comes in a glass bottle, and sometimes I just prefer the fizz. So. Fizzy water, we think's okay, but not the pop. I'm afraid the pop has to go on at every level. Now, the question, though, again from Damien, is fruit juice better for children than fizzy pop? Let me tell you what I do at home, and I can't wait to see your answer. I know you've got a 10-year-old. I have to be really careful. So first of all, we have no fizzy pop in the house whatsoever, haven't for the last 3 years. However, if we're at a restaurant and we're out with other families and they're with their children, if they're having fizzy pops, I'm not one of those dads who go, look, no, not at all, never. Because if I start doing that, then they resent it, and when they're 16, they go off and they do their own thing, and they probably end up having fizzy pop every day. So there is the odd occasion. I'm not one of those dads that say never, 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 but my kids are now so well trained that 9 times out of 10 they'll just ask for water or or a cordial in the restaurant. But how do you deal with this yourself with a 10-year-old? Is it a no-no, or is it occasional? Or
it's not a no-no all the time. He likes a little bit, and as a treat we will reward him. And yes, if we're out in a restaurant, we'll have a little bit, and I'll have a little bit. I think this is about balance. It's not about creating rigid rules that you can never ever break. And my take on it is, as long as you're getting good amounts of healthy hydration with good water, then that's the main thing. But as it happens, my son loves water, and he particularly likes lemon water. So he's happy, and I'm happy with that as well.
Yeah, and you can spruce it up at home. And your kids probably won't like you getting a glass of water and putting bits of ginger in. I love that kick. I've even been known to put chili in my water, just get a bit of a kick, and energizing. But your kids might not like that. But like you say, a dash of lemon, a dash of fresh orange, and slice it and put it in, or even a little bit of pine, whatever you've got, the fruit that's around, put it in, and the water can taste absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it can. Okay.
So there's the answer. Fruit juices are okay if you do them at home in moderation. If you're trying to lose weight, be careful though, because they can be very, very high in sugar content, albeit natural sugar, but it is still sugar at the end of the day. Also, if you're worried about diabetes and so on, cut back on those fruit juices. As Dr. Shan says, really look at water, and look at ways that you can make it a little bit more sexy. Maybe look at some teas, maybe the occasional coffee. But supermarket fruit juices, no. Fizzy pops, really no. If you've got kids, the odd occasion, don't become that tyrant that always says no, no, no. But let's not make it part of the stable diet. Let's not make it something you have in the house at home, because it's so tempting. And they put additives in there to get us addicted. And you won't believe this, but that happens even in shampoos, it happens in toothpaste, it happens in not just cigarettes. The manufacturers are so clever at putting things in there that want us to consume more and more of it. and then it becomes addictive. So the way to break that is just to not have it in the house at all.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So there's our answer. Is fruit juice better for children than fizzy pop? Just avoid both unless you're making your juices at home.
And even then in moderation,
And then
just
in
being
moderation.
cautious with the amount of natural sugars that can be there.
Right, so question next. This is an interesting one. I have bought a watch with a blood pressure monitor. Well done you, because I didn't know there was such thing. So you asked the question, and now there is, and now we're seeing if we can even develop one, because it sounds really cool, but I don't know how reliable they'll be. But what do the numbers mean? So let's concentrate on first answering the question, and then we'll talk about can a watch really be good, a good blood pressure monitor? But the question is, what do the numbers mean with blood pressure? So over to you on this one, Shan.
Okay, so the numbers refer to the top number is known as the systolic, and the second number is known as the diastolic. What these refer to is the heart is, technically the heart is 2 pumps, and what we're doing is measuring the pressure that the heart is able to pump the blood at from the main arteries. And so as it's coming in as a pump, it's coming in 2 pressures. It's pushing and pushing and pushing. So what we're doing is we're measuring that pulsation. What is the difference between the movement? And so that's what the numbers refer to, and the units are in old-fashioned millimeters of mercury. But what we want to do is to try and keep those numbers, the top number below 150, and the bottom number, the diastolic, below 90, wherever possible. And there are a lot of things we can do naturally to help support that, in terms of managing our weight, in terms of cutting out salty foods and processed foods, in terms of regular exercise, and avoiding or managing stress. So that really is what those numbers are referring to, and if we manage to do those appropriate lifestyle measures, we can bring them back into control.
And is 150 over 90 sort of universal, depending on gender, on age brackets? Does it vary? Do the numbers, should they be higher if you're older or lower if you're older? Or is that just a really good benchmark, the 150 over 90 for most people?
That's the general guidance for adults in the UK. Most people tend to be around 120 over 80. And if that's an area that you're around, then that's great. I measure mine regularly just to make sure that I'm keeping in the healthy parameters. And it's important. I think increasingly we're finding people taking a bit more ownership over blood pressure, and it's very important, I feel, to do that. Just checking in once a week, making sure that it's not going too high, and can be a good marker of what's happening within our overall health. And
I know you're, as doctors, very, very busy in your surgeries. If somebody was to go and buy some equipment to measure it themselves, what we'll talk about a watch in a moment, but because that's what the question from Tom was. What sort of equipment should they be buying to just measure that at home, or what do you use at home personally? Or
I would recommend talking to, most chemists and pharmacists sell them, and they can probably give you good advice as to what the best brands are, and how well and accurately they're calibrated. That's all what it's really about, making sure that they're calibrated in an accurate way. And so obviously do take advice from the people that you're buying it from. And
at what state should you be in when you test it? And I'll tell you why I asked the question, because I go for my annual medical every year. And about 6 or 7 years ago, my wife went separately to me in London, and she's gone first. I've gone to a few business meetings, and I'm now going to my checkup. I'm about half a mile from Nottingham Place, where the medical is, and I walk past what looks like my wife's car, but there's a big gentleman sitting in the driver's seat. I thought, oh, it's obviously not my wife's car. So I came walking past, and I look in the back, but it is my wife's car, because the child seat's in the back. So I knock on the window very politely, even though he's stealing my wife's car. He's got a clipboard like this, and underneath he's trying to hotwire my wife's car.
My gosh.
So I open the door, the most silly thing I've ever done. I drag him out, and as I drag him out, this guy's like twice the size of me, starts to push me around. Luckily a taxi driver stopped, helped calm the situation, and held this man till the police come. Cut long story short, I get to the hospital about 20 minutes later. The first thing they do is the blood test, the blood pressure test, and it's off the scale. And I went, well, I think it's off the scale because of what's just happened. They went, okay, this is silly. Let's calm down. Let's do that at the end of all the other tests, because no wonder your blood pressure's high. So you don't want to do this after a bit of exercise. You might not want to do this straight after a meal. When's the best time to measure your blood pressure, and should it be sort of, if you're going to do it and record it and monitor it, same day each week, or same state of mind, or when should we be measuring blood pressure?
I would say times when you're restful. So in the evening, after you've managed to come down, get home and calm down and relax after a busy day at work. And if you want to do it in the mornings, then obviously before you've had anything containing caffeine like tea or coffee, just getting those measures and just seeing what your patterns are like, and making sure that they're gradually coming to within that range.
Just said about coffee then, because I'm a big fan of coffee. I know you like a coffee occasionally as well. There are stories out there that coffee increases blood pressure. Is that true? Or in other words, if you're getting high readings on your blood pressure, obviously you should then go and see a doctor, but if you are getting higher readings than say that 150 over 90, one of the first things, maybe stop the coffee at that stage and just
I wouldn't limit it to that, though. I would look at the overall general sort of lifestyle approach and what can be done about that in terms of weight loss or cutting out salt or managing stress, etc. Everything that we've talked about, not just one single thing. Although there may well be one thing that might be contributing it more than other things, but it's better to have a holistic approach and look at all factors that could be causing or contributing to it.
Okay, so let's just recap on those. This is really, really interesting, because salt's a really interesting topic, especially if you are living primarily already. So things that increase blood pressure, you mentioned stress. We know that stress is something we have to, I know it's very easy to say and sometimes difficult to implement. Try and avoid stress where you can. I've always said if you've got a stressful boss, try and get your boss fired, or try and talk to him and say, stop stressing me out. And if you can't get him fired and you can't get him to change his ways, change your job, because stress, and it's not just at work, because there's lots of other things in life that are stressful, but cutting back on stress is an important thing. And you're saying also here for dropping blood pressure. Salt's an interesting one. So my take on salt, I'd love to get yours in a second, is that with salt, if you're eating lots of processed food, then you're probably consuming too much salt. If you are eating a good primal diet and you're cooking your own foods and the wholesome foods, you're probably okay on salt. In fact, there is a chance that you might even be not getting enough salt. We talk about salt being a real problem, especially with packaged food. But you're saying salt affects blood pressure as well?
It does, yes, by increasing the blood volume. Blood volume is the biggest marker of how high blood pressure goes, and so salt obviously draws in water, and as a result of that, blood pressure can go up.
So stress, salt, coffee, any other, and obviously being overweight puts the blood pressure up. What's the connection there with being overweight, certainly obese, and blood pressure? Is that just the volume of work it's got to do, so therefore there's so much more pressure to push the blood out in the arteries and around the body? Is that
I think that's what I would postulate. I'm not entirely certain, but that would be the most likely theory,
So get the weight under control, make sure you're eating properly, therefore avoiding too much salt. And if you are worried about your blood pressure, maybe you buy the monitor and it's high, then go and see a GP, because blood pressure, I guess if it goes too high, it can lead then to all sorts of things we're trying to avoid.
Yes, and hopefully the GP, unless your blood pressure is sky high, your GP shouldn't instantly offer you medication. They should hopefully have a long chat with you about lifestyle measures, dietary measures, things that you can do to start to bring it down and encourage you to monitor and take control of it.
And for somebody over 18, an adult that's of a reasonable weight, getting readings of sub 150 over 90, if they're just doing that out of interest, then no cause for alarm, but over that, then time to start looking at lifestyle and maybe talk to a GP.
Yes, I mean, I think if you're younger, if you're a younger teenager, then we'd want to have it, considerably more in control than below 150 over 90. I would try and aim for around about 120, 130 over 18.
Okay, I'll tell you what's very interesting here as well is that thing about being in a restful state, because I'm somebody that takes a lot of measurements, and we're talking today about experimenting. I did an experiment recently trying to be in ketosis on a big adventure, and I failed on that one. So I'm the same as you. I'm measuring and monitoring all the time. But I do see quite reasonable big swings in my blood pressure. But I think that's because of time. I don't sort of do it always at the same time. I probably over measure. So I think the thing I was trying to say is don't worry the first second you measure if you've just gone and bought some equipment. Maybe try again a few hours later and a few hours later, because there's quite a few influences around what you've been doing the last couple of hours. Maybe if you've just eaten a meal or just had coffee or so on and so forth. So get a couple of readings. Don't panic on the first one. But if you are getting readings that you're not happy with, then of course it's time to go and see the GP.
Yes, absolutely. If it's consistently high, then seek medical advice. Absolutely.
Brilliant. So, thank you to, let's just double check who that was from. Oh, hang on. We didn't answer Tom's question completely. He says, well, you have answered his question, but I want to just ask here. I bought a watch with blood pressure monitor. What do the numbers mean? I'm just interested in how a watch does blood pressure, because for me, blood pressure is restricting the blood flow to get a measure. So, don't know. Any ideas how that might happen?
I know that you can get some blood pressure monitors that work around the wrist. Okay. So I guess they've devised a watch that can do the same. I'd love to see it. Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Well, there you go. We, what I would suggest, if you bought one of those clever watches, is probably get somebody else that's got a better piece of, well, not better might be the wrong word, because they might be the best thing since sliced bread. Not sliced bread, because we don't do sliced bread here. It might be the best thing since homemade good cooking. But I would measure it against another piece of equipment that's known for great accuracy. So if you have just bought a fandangled watch or band to measure it, it might be brilliant, but just maybe test that and calibrate it against maybe a doctor's piece of equipment or somebody else's equipment, just to make sure that it's giving a similar reading.
Yes, and also just understand that your blood pressure varies minute to minute. So it's not going to be identical number-wise if you measure it with your wrist and then with your arm. So it's worth bearing in mind to just have a little bit of leeway there in terms of comparing the numbers. Yeah,
and there are some good tolerances anyway, aren't there, of what's in that normal range anyway. So we're not endorsing, nor are we saying that watches are good or bad, because Tom's asked the question. All we'd say is probably just calibrate it against another piece of equipment a few times, just to see if it's in the right ballpark. If it's always coming up higher or always coming up lower, then what you'll know is to add a little bit or subtract a little bit with that certain piece of equipment. But measuring is good. We always say you can't manage what you can't measure. Over measuring can also be a problem these days as well, because I know sometimes I get my annual medical back and then I phone my doctor, he says, Steve, look, you're over analysing it. So over-analysing is also not fantastic, but you also can't manage what you can't measure. So get some indication of your health, your blood pressure and other measurements is always a good thing. That's great. So I think we can tick your question off, Tom. I hope you're happy with the answer to that one. Great. So next question. Right, Shan. A few people at work have colds and one with the flu. How long are they contagious, says Tommy?
Gosh, right. That can be so variable that it's difficult for me to give you a definitive answer. The way it's contagious is obviously from the respiratory droplets that they emit as a result of coughing and spluttering. They can sometimes last even before they've had the actual full symptom of the cold, and they can sometimes persist after they're over the worst of it. So it's impossible to give you an exact answer there. It's just important to be wary of it. But I think the bigger point that I'd like to make with this question is doing what we can to make sure that we're retaining our own health and being in a strong position with a supported immune system to prevent us from catching a cough and cold. I haven't personally had a cough or a cold since 2010, swine flu. Brilliant. Simply by looking after how I eat and how I exercise and how I hydrate and how I manage stress. And they're the key things that we can do that are in our control to help prevent that from happening. And that's despite seeing 4 or 5 people every day with coughing and spluttering all over me. So it's
you've just raised a really good point. You as a GP having patients, do you call them patients or clients?
Patients at the moment.
Patients coming in with coughs and colds, looking for remedies and solutions and advice, and you haven't actually picked up any of those because you've built your immune system up, because you're looking after yourself, because you're aware of the things to fight off the colds and the flus. So I think that in itself is a great answer, isn't it? That like Dr. Shan says, yes, coughs and colds. First of all, are both coughs, colds, flus, are they all contagious in certain circumstances?
Well, yes. There's a respiratory infection involved, whether it's viral or bacterial. Theoretically, they are indeed contagious, yes.
So they are contagious, but if you can do certain steps to build your own defence up, then you limit or reduce the chances of you catching those infections. Because we have a GP here who sees patients every day, and I guess this time, certainly in the winter, more and more people with the colds and the flus, and yet Dr. Shan since 2010 hasn't had a cold. I've not had a cold since I've turned primal because all the vitamin C I take, because I'm watching what I'm eating and so on and so forth. So build your own defence up. If your defences are low because you're not feeling great that day or whatever, or that you haven't got your weight yet under control, or other things, or maybe you're not taking the right vitamins, minerals, or you're not eating nutritional food, and somebody walks into the office, Tommy, coughing and spluttering and whatever, probably give them a slightly wider berth.
Yes, I would certainly recommend that, but also look at what you can do to protect yourself in terms of your diet, your lifestyle, your environment, your stress levels, your hydration, and getting foods with good quality nutrients, antioxidants that you need to have to preserve your own health and well-being. That's all I've done. It's really not rocket science. It's very simple, and it seems to be effective so far.
That's brilliant. What's your view? And by the way, we never know where these conversations are going to go. And I hope Dr. Shan doesn't mind me putting him on the spot.
Yes, it's
What's your view on, my mum has the flu jab every year. My mum's 78. She's been having it for 4 or 5 years. A couple of years ago, she had the flu jab and still got the flu. I think the question is, are they good? Do they work? What age should you start thinking about the flu jab? Or is the better thing really just to start getting your health back on track? What a loaded question.
Oh gosh.
Too many questions in one there.
Well, the first thing I'll say is what you just said, getting your health on track, doing what you can to support your own health and well-being, and looking at everything, all the parameters that we've talked about. That's the most important part here. You can still have the flu jab and catch the flu. The flu jab is not 100% protection from developing the flu. What's important is doing what we can to prevent the flu from taking hold of us. In terms of the actual virus itself, the vaccine itself, my answer is very simple, and that is informed consent. There are guidelines in place right now as to at-risk groups, people who ought to have it, to people who have over the age of 65, or if they're full-time carers, or if they have diabetes, etc. There's a long list of recommendations, and they are deemed the at-risk groups, and they're the ones who are invited every year for the flu jab. And it's recommended according to the present guidelines that they have it, but the individual should make the final decision. You should decide for yourself whether you want to have the flu jab or not, and I don't think anyone should judge you either way. That's my personal opinion.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Can we, for the viewers and the listeners and people watching, whether you'll be watching the live show right now, if you're watching the live show on TV, it's 6 o'clock on a Monday, or if you're not, you might be watching a clip on YouTube or whatever. Can we clear up, what is the difference between, or is there a difference between the cold and a flu?
Yes, there's a huge difference. So a cold is, it could be anything from a sort of, a sniffle, runny nose, sore throat, and feeling, a little bit off, low energy, and coughing and spluttering. The flu is very different. The flu, when you have the flu because, you can't move. You're just aching all over, exhausted. You just want to be left alone. Last time I had flu, I felt like I was dying. It was that bad, and it wasn't man flu, just so you know. It was full-blown flu.
I'm going to come to that as a separate question in a moment, actually.
And so that's the real difference. It really comes back to how you're feeling. If you've got those awful generalized aches and pains, and you're absolutely exhausted, running fevers, feeling dizzy, feeling sick, then that's more likely to be the flu. And if that's what you've got, then it's best to get yourself to bed. Big jug of water, rest up, take anything you need to take to help control fevers, and just look after yourself.
Now, my wife, before we started to learn about Primal a few years back, sadly has had way too many courses of antibiotics, and as far as I'm concerned, antibiotics and the cold and the flu, they're a bit of a mismatch. Can you maybe go into a bit of detail why antibiotics really aren't a fix for a cold or a flu?
Yes, so last Thursday was World Health Organization's International Antibiotic Awareness Day, and increasingly we're finding that antibiotics are used or prescribed or given inappropriately for viral or self-limiting conditions. Antibiotics only work against bacterial infections, so that's the key difference to make. Flu is a viral illness, it's not bacterial. However, flu can actually put us at risk of succumbing to a secondary infection in the form of a bacterial infection. So
that's because your immune system's down, you've got something hammering your immune system, and therefore more susceptible to pick up a bacterial infection. Yes,
and so you could say that the respiratory mucus and everything is actually a fairly good breeding ground for a bacterial infection to arise, in which case we would want to start an antibiotic in that situation if it's a prolonged or protracted illness. It very much depends on what the clinical picture is like, and obviously it's an individual decision made by the prescribing doctor at the time. So yes, antibiotics don't do anything for flu, and they don't do anything for viral infections. If there's no bacterial element to it, they're not necessary. They only work against bacterial infections, and it really depends on which bacteria it is and whereabouts it's situated in your body.
So just to hope that's really cleared up the question, because I get asked that a lot. You know, a virus and a bacterial infection are two very, very, very different things, and I really feel for many GPs, including yourself, because I know people like my wife go in and say, I've got this really bad flu, just give me antibiotics, and if the flu hasn't turned into a bacterial infection, that must be so much pressure for you to...
It is, yes, and unfortunately it's actually a lot worse than it sounds. Some people are convinced that they absolutely must have an antibiotic. And we can have a long discussion. I remember one case, about a decade ago, I think, someone who I was convinced had a viral infection, and he had it was nothing sinister, no worrying markers or anything. I gave him an information sheet about viral infections, how these are self-limiting, and he met all the criteria there. And I said, just go have a read of that, make sure that you're following the advice that's there, look after yourself, keep yourself well hydrated, get your rest. And then a couple of days later, he came back much worse. And the doctor said, well, actually, I think this might be a bacterial infection, and here's some antibiotics. 24 hours later, he was really bad, had to go to hospital, and had a peritonsillar abscess drained. Oh. And his ENT consultant said, that doctor that you first saw, meaning me, should have given you antibiotics. And that puts us in a very sort of dangerous situation into, okay, so when should we give them and when shouldn't we? And, the important advice we give is not so much, whether or not you should take antibiotics, but also the lifestyle advice. What do you need to do? If you're feeling run down, tired, sick, dizzy, don't go to work, go to bed, rest up, take it easy, relax, keep yourself well hydrated, and follow all the recommended advice that you're being given. An antibiotic isn't going to do all that much for you if you're carrying on putting yourself in a stressful environment and taking on all the daily tasks that you do if you're at 100% health. If you're only feeling 20% of your health, then you can't expect to operate at 100% level.
Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to say antibiotics are a bad thing because they've saved so many lives, but
totally agree.
You try and avoid antibiotics where you can, because it's antibiotic. We know the microbiome in our gut is very, very, very important, and therefore every time you take antibiotics, not only do they kill the bad guys, but they can also damage the microbiome, and then it can take you quite a long time, sometimes months and months and months, even years, to rebuild up your microbiome with the good guys that look after your health. So first of all, don't go asking for antibiotics. Let the GP be the judge of whether it's a viral or a bacterial problem that you've got. Let them be the judge of that, because honestly, if you can avoid antibiotics, you should. I'm going to come back though one more time to what Tommy said. A few people at work have coughs and one with the flu. How long are they infectious? I think the key takeaway that I've just learned from this, and I've never thought about this till today, is that you as a GP, if they were totally contagious and like really, really, really bad, you'd be suffering colds and flus continually. Mm-hmm. And I bet, we all know some GPs that aren't as healthy and as fit as you, and even Dr. Dano, of a GP, years back, he himself was a bit overweight. He would have been more at risk then than he is today because he's in good health. Get your health in control, get the right vitamins and minerals in your food and the right nutrition, supplement where you need to supplement, vitamin C. Personally, I've been taking vitamin C for several years. I have not had a cold or a flu since turning primal. Get your defense in place, and then you're less likely to pick up the nasty bugs around the office when everybody comes in. But if you are not in a great place at the moment. Just try and avoid, it says how long, I think how long's a piece of string, just try and avoid the coughs and the splurts. And if somebody has got the flu in the office, I would be saying you should be at home.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're a manager,
Absolutely.
Send them home.
Yeah, because you don't want the rest of the team to all catch it, obviously.
Yeah, just give you an idea about kids at school, by the way, these days. I don't know whether this is a law or whether this is guidance, but certainly my children's school, where they go in Warwick, if they're sick at any time, as in physically vomit, they're not allowed back into school for 48 hours now. Is that medical advice, just school's own rules, or... But yeah, because if you're throwing up, there's probably something infectious that you're carrying. So, things are infectious. Build up your own immune system, and if you are a manager or a boss, you should be sending people home if you think they've got the flu, because they are contagious, and they are more contagious to those around them that aren't as healthy as maybe they want to be.
Agreed.
That's brilliant. I think we've answered your question there, Tommy, and some hopefully. Right, I've got one more. I love this question. You're almost there because your son's another 3 years and he will be a teenager. I love this question. This is from Paula. I can ask Shan first. This is great. Right, I have a teenage son. How many calories should I be feeding him a day?
I'm going to pose this to you, actually, Steve. What's your answer to
this?
Well,
I've got, how many teenage sons I've got? Well, I've got 7 kids. I've got 2 that are teenagers and they're boys. I've got a daughter who's a teenager. My first thing is, how many calories should I be feeding them a day? I try and make them feed themselves as teenagers. Depends how much into their teens they are. How many calories? Okay. I personally, as if you've read my book, don't measure calories as such, because here's an analogy for you. So nearly all food that you eat breaks down into the 3 macronutrients, and that is fat, protein, and carbohydrates. But measuring calories that you get in from fat, carbohydrates, and protein, they're not the same thing. My analogy is this. You've got $100 American, you've got 100 euros, and you've got 100 pounds. They're all 100 and they're all a currency, but what they actually buy and what they afford you are different things. And that's the same with carbohydrates. So it depends on carbohydrates, fat, protein. So it depends what it breaks down to. If you're eating good quality proteins and good quality fats and keeping those carbs right down to a minimum, then the calorie isn't the thing that you're counting. What you should be counting is the nutritional value of the foods that you're putting in. Don't obsess about calories with your teenagers. Obsess about the nutritional value that you're getting from those calories, because if somebody's just drinking Coca-Cola all day and saying I'm getting 2,000 calories a day from Coke, well, you're getting no nutritional value. So then worry about the amount of calories. If you're eating healthy, wholesome foods and you're cooking meals as a family and you're sitting down the old traditional way and eating together your greens and your salads and so on and so forth, then don't even worry about counting the calories. But this is Ask the Doctor and not Ask Steve. So let's ask a doctor, how many calories should Paula be feeding her teenage son?
I put that to you just in view of the conversation we had about this earlier on. As I was saying, not all calories are created equally. As you correctly say, you can get a bag full of sugar, there's an absolute load of calories in there, but that's not going to sustain you. It's more important about the quality of nutrients you're getting and getting them in the healthy, correct balance that we should be taking. And that would be really what I would emphasize there, not worrying about counting calories, but looking at the quality nutrients. I went to a health retreat some years ago with some friends for a week, and it was fantastic, great experience, but it was very experiential. We were in the middle of nowhere, and we had buffets every day full of food, and the guidance we were given was eat to your heart's content, eat as much as you like. But the food was very simple, very basic. We had salmon, fresh fish, very few red meats, some lean chicken, lots of green vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, lots of salads. There was no breads, no pastas, no rice, no potatoes, absolutely no other drinks. But the guidance was very simple. You just eat as much as you want until you're full. And you do that 3 times a day. At the end of the week, everybody lost between 2 to 5 kilos in 1 week, just because we were eating what we're supposed to eat. And I think if you did a calorie count of what we were eating at the time, it was probably 2,500, 3,000 calories, so because it was such delicious food, but it wasn't making us gain weight. In fact, like I say, most of us lost weight. So it really comes back, as I say, to the quality rather than quantity of calories.
Yeah, absolutely. Paula, what I would say is that by any purchase you make for Primal Cure, you will get a free copy of edition 2 of my book. And in there, if you read that, you'll just get it, because it's not about counting calories. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about a teenage son, somebody like myself in my 50s, or somebody early 20s, like
44.
Well, you look like it, like Dr. Shan. Or whether you're talking to my parents who are in their late 70s, it actually isn't about counting calories if you're eating food that the body is designed to eat. Your example there of not even thinking about how many you're eating on a retreat, as long as what you're eating is great. But if I was to put in front of you just pasta and rice and potatoes and cans of fizzy pop, then my goodness gracious me, even half the calories you're supposed to be getting aren't giving you any nutritional value. What you need to measure is the nutritional value. How many vitamins, how many minerals, how much fiber are you consuming? Because if you have a load of fiber in your meal, the body doesn't consume it. It doesn't take any calories, extract it from that. If your microbiome, the gut bacteria is the right type of bacteria, they will let calories come in and go out without using all the energy. But if you've got completely the wrong bacteria in your stomach, completely the opposite happens. They drain every calorie possible out of what you're eating. So it's about getting your health in a good position, and in this case your teenage son, and then letting them eat pretty much as they want, as long as it's wholesome foods.
Yes.
But I want to take this question a slightly different way, because I actually don't know the answer to this. So kids are growing. So, I've got a 3-year-old, a 10, a 13, a 15, a 17. I'm not looking at the answers here. I remember how old they are. A 26 and a 27-year-old and a granddaughter. But I've never thought about it this way, is they're growing, so they need to be growing. So in other words, they're kind of putting on weight, because they need to be putting on weight as they're growing. Do they therefore burn more calories than we would burn once we've stopped growing? Or do we just treat their diet the same as we'd treat our own diet and just keep it healthy and actually still not worry about the number of calories?
They will be burning more calories in their sort of early teens when they're going through the major sort of growth spurt that they go through. And obviously it's important to get those calories in, but at the same time, like I say, if you just focus on the whole foods and they're eating every day to their heart's content and they're getting good quality whole food nutrition within their diets, then they should be absolutely fine.
Yeah, and there's a phrase that you've heard many, many times, I'm sure, and we talk about it a lot here, that you are what you eat, and it's the nutritional goodness that's in food that helps replace and replenish the skin, and replace and replenish, the lungs and the heart and so on and so forth. So, good in means good out, and it's even more important as teenagers are growing, that as they're growing and they're replacing body parts and replacing the skin, that we call it GIGO in computer speak, which is garbage in, garbage out. So, if you want your teenagers to grow properly and really be healthy and so on and so forth, it's that nutritional value, because you are what you eat, or certainly when it comes to eating meats, you are what you eat. So that's why going organic is obviously much better than chicken and beef that's been force-fed the wrong type of diet. So you are what you eat. You are what you eat. Nutritional value. If you're going to count anything with food, count nutritional value rather than calories. And if you are going to count calories, the only one I ever, and no calories are the same, but just if you are going to lump it up and say, okay, but there must be some correlation a little bit, because $100, £100, €100, they're kind of almost the same. If you are, just remember one thing, especially if you're trying to lose weight, this is going off the subject a little bit, there's 3,500 calories approximately in a pound of weight. And if you're trying to lose a pound of weight, then less in, but I'm going off subject here because that's a whole different thing. I'll just get back to teenage sons, and calories aren't what you should be measuring, its nutritional value.
Yes.
Well, thank you for your questions this week. I hope you've enjoyed the answers. They will be all loaded onto the internet, onto YouTube, and also onto our website. But actually, I want to fill in one more question, because I actually thought, is it 49 minutes or 59 minutes? Oh, we've got 10 more minutes. Oh, great. Okay, well, we'll throw one more in from Andrew. I'm going to put you on the spot here, and you can say, I don't want to answer, because mobile phone companies have got far more money than we have, and we don't want to be sued. But the question is, and I'll pick up if you don't want to on this one. Andrew says, is using mobile phones dangerous for the brain?
Okay, so yeah, great question.
Really good question.
And I think there's two ways to look at this in terms of whether we're talking about these mobile phone signals we're getting, or if we're talking about this increasing phone screen time addiction.
Let's break them down to two.
So let's talk about both.
I think Andrew might be alluding to the signals to the brain, which are called EMF, electromagnetic forces. So let's assume that's what you mean, Andrew, in the question, but then we'll break it down to two, because you've got, I think, an even bigger, we've both as parents got a bigger concern. So let's go with our electromagnetic forces dangerous for the brain.
We don't know is the simple answer. The research is, still being done. Nothing conclusive at this time, and I'm sure if there is ever something that is conclusive, then we'll all know about it very, very quickly. So we don't really know the answer to that. I think if you have concerns about it, then it's always best to limit the amount of proximity you have to your phone, and certainly if you're sleeping with your phone on your bedside, then perhaps put it a bit further away. So that would be my short thoughts on that. But
well,
I think
I'm prepared to be braver. Okay, I'm prepared to be braver. I think that there is a problem. If you buy mobile phones and you look at the real small print, there is always a little disclaimer in the small print, and our children never see it. We don't see it because we're so excited to open the nice box, and the manual goes down there because you don't need the manual. But there is small print around electromagnetic forces as a warning, and the guidelines I actually talked about this in the book. So Andrew, the inexpert, just get the book. There is a section on this in here, and the advice that comes out from some experts is as follows. First of all, we have to accept that mobile phones are part of modern day life, and including myself, we've all got them. And part of the whole Primal Cure is about avoiding toxins. So I want to avoid anything that might be toxic to my body. So here's the bits of advice. First of all, try not to put it up to your ear all the time. Try, if you can, to have the hands-free cable, or just press that speaker bit and hold it away here. The other bit of advice is watch out for weak signals, because if you've got a weak signal on your phone is trying harder and harder and harder to get a signal, so therefore it's putting out more electromagnetic forces. So try and get near a window so the signal gets better. Try and go out in the garden so the signal gets better. Try not to use a mobile phone when it's really trying hard to get a signal. Go hands-free where you can. Obviously, certainly don't put it up to the ear when you're driving, because of course that's a whole different danger that we're now talking about. But I think there is a problem because they're kind of warning us against it in very small print on the boxes, and it kind of makes sense. However, can we be paranoid about it? Probably not, because these days I can't even imagine what's going on in all the airwaves around us the whole time. So I don't think we can overstress about it, but part of this trying to live a toxic-free life, try and avoid putting it up here the whole time. So I was a bit braver than you there, and all Motorola and Nokia, they can all try and sue me if they want, but that's my belief. But let's interpret Andrew's question in a different way about just overall use of mobile phones.
Well, yes, certainly we're seeing more and more screen dependence, I believe it's being called, and there is, some parties talking these words like addiction, which is rather concerning. But yes, we are seeing a lot of it now, particularly around social media, and people craving likes and following, etc. And I think it's becoming a concern. There have been times that I've been doing a lot of work from home, and I'm on either my laptop or my mobile working, just to be clear, not to surfing other stuff. And at the end of it, I actually start to feel something out of balance in my body in terms of my overall health. Something is just not quite right, and whether I've missed out on activity or exercise. But certainly, if we are having that increased screen dependence, then that can't be good for us. There's so many things happening in this wonderful world that we're potentially missing out on. There's already thoughts about how the blue light appearance can start to mess up our circadian rhythms and affect our sleep. I generally advise to avoid all tech after about 7 p.m. wherever possible. All laptops, mobile phones, and tablets, just put them to one side, and just be present, be with your family, or be with your friends or yourself, and just start to unwind and relax. I think if you're on your laptop or your mobile phone going into 10:30, 11, there's a good chance that you're not going to sleep very well. It's just started to really sort of mess around with your biorhythms and how you're feeling. And don't take my word for it, you may well have experienced it yourself. So yes, I think there are concerns about increasing screen dependence, and we're now seeing it now with, I've got an iPhone, and it gives me a summary every week of what my average screen time has been like, and that's quite useful to look at.
I didn't know you could do that. I should compare mine to my wife's. I should compare mine to my children, because I've got this real belief, and I'll talk about it in the book. There's research now suggesting that the IQ of our children might be 10% lower than our generation because of what we call the interruption phase that we're going through. And it goes something like this, that without the mobile phone, you and I will go home, we might read a book, and we'll really get into it because we're not getting interrupted by a mobile phone. But what's happening with the next generation is there's this interruption culture. They're almost waiting for that ping of the next, they don't even have emails these days, but the ping of the next, I don't know, what, a Facebook message, or the next this, that and the other. And the brain is constantly waiting for that ping of push towards them with information, which means that we can't get into and really digest what we're reading. So, if you're trying to learn a subject or study something, and certainly while they're at school, try while your kids are studying, take the mobile phone away from them, because they're not concentrating. It's really difficult for any human being to concentrate on one thing when the brain, consciously or subconsciously, is waiting for the next ping on the phone of an alert of an email, or your friends have just sent you a new photograph, and so on and so forth. So this interruption culture is causing an IQ issue. So they are two separate issues. There's the EMF issue that I do think that Andrew was alerting to. And by the way, you just said about sleep. I used to, a few years ago, have problems with sleep before I went Primal, and I got the app that you put the phone by the side of your bed and it tells you if you've had a good night's sleep. I've stopped doing that because at the end of first of all, I'm sleeping a lot better, but secondly, if you think about that, I'm using electromagnetic force, which is something that might be frying my brain, to tell me if I'm getting a good night's sleep or not. The best way to get a good night's sleep is doing exactly what Dr. Shan says: limit technology later in the evening, get the phones out of the bedroom, because again, if you've got your mobile phone in your bedroom, you're kind of subconsciously, while you're trying to sleep, you're not getting into your natural rhythm because you're waiting for that ping of information or alert and so on and so forth. Ban that technology late in the evening and go back to the old-fashioned way of calming the body down. Find a book you're really, really interested in, even a health book, and slowly rewind the good old-fashioned one. Or just have a chat. Conversation. My wife has done that to me in a restaurant. I'm here, darling. I'm here. She's there under the table, sending messages. I'm actually here. Can we just have a conversation? I hope she's not watching this right now. Or we could. But mobile phones. We're going to wrap up the question from Tommy, which was not from Tommy, from Andrew. Is using mobile phones dangerous for the brain? A doctor doesn't want to confirm because we don't know. Knows how dangerous electromagnetic forces are, but there are warnings on the box if you read the small print. Likewise, we think microwaving food's okay, and in fact, I use the microwave at home quite a lot. We think microwaves are okay, but what's not okay is when my little 3-year-old goes right up and watches, his little dish going around and around and around, heating up, because there are electromagnetic forces at play. Even hairdryers have electromagnetic forces. Avoid them where you can. We can't quantify whether they're bad or not for us, because it's going to take many more years for this to play out until we really know one way or the other. But why take the chance? Dr. Shan, thank you again.
You're welcome.
Tune in next week for an hour with Dr. Dan, and hopefully we'll be answering some of your questions.
Need to perform better in the gym? or increase your energy and physical performance when sprinting? Clinical research has been conducted and approved by the European Union that 3 grams or more of creatine daily increases physical performance in successive bursts of short-term, high-intensity exercise, more commonly known as HIIT. Daily creatine consumption in combination with resistance training can also improve muscle strength in adults over the age of 55. You can find creatine in organic animal proteins such as beef, salmon and tuna, at around 4.5 to 5 grams per kilogram of meat or fish. However, it's unlikely that you're going to eat that much meat on training days. Hence, we've formulated Primal Creatine, the preference of professional sports people around the world. Primal Creatine is created with your health in mind.